There's an elephant in the room. In fact, there's an elephant in the room in every house in the country. She's really sad and lonely because people are afraid of her and think that she doesn't exist and pretend that she doesn't exist. Her name is End of Life Ellie. And I'm talking about her here today because I wanted to bring in the elephant from the room. And it's a lot easier to talk about this subject when you do that. I'm a very practical person. I like to get things done. I like to have a list and tick things off. And I like to know what is happening. And that has served me very well, on the whole, up until the time that something happened that I was completely unprepared for. 6 years ago, the phone rang. It was my husband. It's stomach cancer. I was really shocked. I hadn't thought for 1 minute that it would be anything worse than a stomach ulcer. We decided that we needed to tell the family, and I rang my brother. Towards the end of the conversation, he said, "Well, think of it this way. At least the food bills will go down." Which was our introduction to the black humour that surrounds topics that we are uncomfortable with. Which is pretty amazing, because statistics show that 100% of us are going to die. That's all of us here. Every one of us, me included. I am passionate about educating people, about to become more at ease with dying, with death, with grief. I'm passionate to help people stop crossing to the other side of the road when they see a bereaved person that they know because they feel awkward and they don't know what to say. It still does happen. And I'm passionate about people completing end-of-life plans, just like a birth plan, and for that to become the norm. But I didn't always feel like this. 6 years ago, with that diagnosis for Philip, he was recommended chemo, an operation, and more chemo. You know, when something like that happens, you carry on living. You carry on living because that you are alive. And you are alive right up until the moment that you're not. Right up until the moment. He used it as a wake-up call. He listened to his heart's desire, and he started writing again, for which I was really grateful, because he was a great writer, but he hadn't been doing it. He took care of a few relationships in his life from his past where he had fallen out with people, and he mended them. And he answered some very important questions. And here's how that happened. The operation didn't work. They didn't get all the cancer out, and so we were faced with the prospect of him dying perhaps sooner than we had thought. One day I received an email from a friend, Barbara, in Los Angeles, and in it was a long list of questions that she said, please make sure that Philip answers these before he dies. So one Saturday morning, I sat up in bed with him and the laptop, and I asked him the questions, and he gave me his answers. And they're not easy questions. Things like, what do you want your body to be dressed in? And do you have any precious things that you would like to give to people? And even more practical things like, tell me how the car works. And the burglar alarm system. Very practical. He gave me his answers. And you know what? That morning turned out to be a really wonderful morning. It was so loving. And we were so intimate. Yes, it was poignant, but it was full of tenderness. And later on, we referred to it as our last project together. he went into the hospital. Now, we didn't know that when he went to the hospital, he was never going to come out again. Just like we didn't know that this was his last year when it was. You don't know when it's your last year. You don't know until it's finished, until it's over, and you're looking back. So he went to hospital. And one of the things that happened there was that he told me, he gave me a message about when he was going to die. I had friends staying with me. And one of us, we were taking it in turns to stay with him in his room overnight, so he was never alone. And one night, I received a text in the middle of the night saying, "Please come up, Philip is distressed." So I shot up. We managed to calm him down, and he went back to sleep. And then she told me, he said he wanted to watch a television program. Now, this was really odd, especially in the middle of the night, but he had not wanted to watch television the whole time he was in the hospital, 6 weeks. She said he wanted to watch Countdown, his favourite programme. Now, I knew, because I had studied, both professionally and personally, and done a lot of reading about dying and death and grief, that people quite often send a message to their loved ones when they're near to the end. And I knew immediately that he was telling me he was counting down. And actually that felt really good. That felt really good. The next day, I was sitting with him, with my friends there as well, by the bed. He was doing that kind of rattly type of breathing, which is so unpleasant to listen to. And then it shifted. And it shifted to a breath, and then a long gap, and another breath. And then there were no more breaths. You don't know when the last breath is until after it's happened. Somewhere in that long gap, I saw him, his face change colour a little bit. But more to the point, I had to stop talking to him lying on the bed there. I had to turn around and look up at the ceiling and carry on talking up there as if he were up there, because he was not on the bed anymore. All that was there was an empty bag. I was propelled into grief on a stormy sea, battered around all over the place, starting with shock and horror and disbelief, even though I knew he was going to die. But it also included sadness, tears, rage, anger, worry, anxiety, and even moments of joy. That really muddled me up. I had no idea what was going on at all. Whereas before, when cancer had come knocking at the door with fear as its companion, now grief was knocking at the door with all these emotions. But there was one thing that I did know. I knew that it was really important that I had to feel these feelings. The door, we had tried to close the door on cancer, but this time, I don't know why, but I knew I had to open the door, throw up the blinds, open the windows, and open the back door at the same time. Because then the feelings could come, be around for a bit, and then they could leave easily. And that served me really well. One morning, about 4 weeks after Philip died, I woke up and the thought was in my head, which was, if that was an empty bag lying on the bed, what is this? A filled bag. They're all filled bags. What is it filled with? And that became a mission for me. I had to find out. It was really important. At the same time as being on that mission, I was being humbled by grief. Very humbled, because I discovered that I had all kinds of judgments about it. I judged how long it should take. I judged what it was that I should be feeling. And I judged when those feelings were around. It didn't stop me feeling the feelings because of the open door policy, but I had the judgments as well. And what I discovered in this journey is that grief has many forms and they're all okay. And I have another little story that I want to share with you that helps to illustrate this. About 3 months after Philip died, we had another terrible family tragedy. His eldest granddaughter, Becky, aged just 16, also died of cancer. And a few months after that, I met with her parents and siblings down in a cottage in the southwest of Scotland. We were going to scatter Philip's ashes and some of Becky's ashes in a ritual honouring of them both at a place where the families had loved to meet and have wonderful holidays. One sunny morning during that week, I was out walking on the beach with Becky's sister, Rita, aged 9. We were looking for white shells amongst the black rocks. But I wanted to know how she felt about her sister dying. So I asked her, Rita, what do you think happens when someone dies? And she said, without stopping looking for the shells, she said, oh, they go up to a floating garden in heaven. Grandpa Philip's up there with his boat. Becky's living there in a mansion with a room all to herself. Michael Jackson's there too, and all the people from the Titanic. It was so beautiful. I felt so touched with it, and tears came to my eyes. And, you know, this little 9-year-old girl had found a way to describe a terrible thing that had happened in her family. About 3 years after Philip died, I published a book called Gifted by Grief. And I was able to call it that simply because by this time I had felt gifted. I certainly hadn't felt like that at the time, but over the years, I began to notice that there were very many gifts that I was receiving. And one of them, of course, is being able to stand here tonight. It is ironic. If he hadn't died, I wouldn't be here tonight, but I am grateful to be able to speak like this. So although I've said some of the things that contribute towards a good death, here are 3 that are really important that I've learned. The first is, live here now. I know that sounds really obvious, but it's really important because remember, we don't know when it's our last year. We don't know when it's our last breath. We haven't got a clue. We all pretend to play the game that we know, and we don't. Now, because I'm also a very practical person, I like to know, how do you do it? How do you live here now? So what I did was I filtered everything through a little sentence, and the sentence is, am I enjoying myself? Really simple. Am I enjoying myself? If the answer was no, I just stopped what I was doing, and I still do that now. It does make for a few awkward situations sometimes, but I now know that life is too short to bother about that or to be worried about it. The second thing is, discover who you are. Discover what this feeling is. Because if there's a body that gets left behind that isn't who you are, then it means that you're not your emotions, you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, your beliefs, your ideas. You're not any of it. So what are you? So if you ask that question and dig deep, then it's going to be a lot easier to cope with the idea that one day this body is going to go. The third thing, answer the questions. Remember the questions that I asked Philip? There's lots of them. There's lots that you can do to prepare well now for a good end of life. And I'd like to acknowledge the elephant in the room again, and I'd like to invite you this week maybe, to go and acknowledge the elephant in the room in your house. And maybe have a conversation with her. Maybe have a conversation with one of your friends or one of your family about dying, about death, or about grief, and become much more at ease with it. Thank you.